Today, we are going to talk about the local student research symposia. We also have members of YLACES, which is youth. I'm going to try and get this right, Dixon, Youth Learning as Citizen Environmental Scientists.
Correct.
And they are here because they have funded both our regional student research symposia and local student research symposia. And then Dr. Eleanor Jaffee, who is the outside evaluator for the US Globe office and the North America Regional office, which is also us, who has been doing evaluation for years for us on the student research symposia and also does evaluation on the local ones. So they are going to be presenting some of that and some opportunities for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to them. Please, if you have any questions, to put those in the chat box. You can raise your hand as well, and we will make sure we get to you. And feel free to turn off your camera and make sure you mute your mic while we have our presenter speaking.
All right, Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the first water cooler of the year. Let me get my screen share set up. Oh, before I do, since Jen pointed out the wildcat, I've got the domestic cat, who is my home office mascot, joining us as well, special guest. We'll be presenting on the YLACES supported Local Student Research Symposia, or local SRS. There should be time for Q&A at the end, but please feel free to ask any clarifying questions during the presentation, especially the kind where you need to kind of have the slide up to ask your question. As Jen said, I'm Eleanor Jaffee from Insights Evaluation, and I serve as the Evaluation and Learning Partner for YLACES, as well as the Globe US Country Coordination Office and the North America Regional Office. And I've been evaluating the regional and local student research symposia for about 5 years, including the 2024 YLACES supported local SRS events we'll be discussing today. And also joining us today is Dr. Dixon Butler, founder and president of YLACES. He'll be sharing information with you about YLACES grant opportunities later in the presentation. Should we get a wave from Dixon? And Lee Kuykendall, also from YLACES, is here today. All right. So YLACES offers grants up to $5,000 to support local SRS events modeled on the Globe Regional SRS. At these events, students present on their environmental research projects to STEM professional reviewers and peers, engage with them in project review, and participate in other science-related activities. And can I just see a show of hands, who has been to a Globe SRS or an SRS of any kind before? I know we've got some cameras off, but you can use the hand raise icon. I can't see everyone here, but I'm not seeing a lot of hands up. So I think we've got some folks here who are new to the SRS. So before we go on, let's talk a little bit about what we mean when we say the Globe SRS or the SRS model. Okay, so on your screen right now, these are the core components of the Globe SRS model. The research presentations and review by STEM professionals and peers is at the core of the SRS experience. It helps students understand that being part of a scientific community is about learning and strengthening their research to benefit the world around them. Interactions with STEM professionals, especially with diverse STEM professionals, is also an important part of this model. It shows students that scientists are people like them and like the people in their home communities, and this helps them to see themselves as future scientists. There can be other activities at the SRS too. Lots of the events include hands-on activities, career talks, and keynote speakers. Some include field trips and tours that expose students to the natural, institutional, and cultural assets of the region in which the event takes place. Some also offer training and PD for the educators who are attending either on their own or with their students who are presenting. So I'm just going to pause here and see, do we have any questions so far? I see a few things in the chat. Okay,
Well,
raised
I
hand.
just wanted to add that the students present first to each other, to their peers as student researchers. And that's very much as it would be at a professional meeting of professional scientists, attended by other professional scientists who would share their research with one another.
That's right. Part of this experience is like having a preview of what it's like to participate in a national research conference. Okay. So to zoom out a little bit here and explain the context of these local SRS events a bit more, the Globe Regional SRS were held annually from 2016 to 2019 in the 6 Globe US regions. And I've got a link to the regions that I can not copy from speaker notes, it turns out. So if anyone's got that link handy, Jen, or if Haley's here, you can see what the Globe regions are in the US, which states they include. These events, when they first got started, were sponsored by the NSF, but later by NASA and by YLACES. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the regional SRS were canceled for 2 years. And in 2022, concerns about the health and safety issues involved in holding large regional events still remained. So the Globe US office tried something new instead, offering grants to support local SRS events via a request for proposals. 7 proposals were submitted and all 7 events were awarded grant funding, and these grants were supported by YLACES. After evaluation of the local events showed positive results and unique value for US Globe programming, they were continued in 2023 by YLACES, even as the Globe Regional SRS resumed. And now that's been in about 4 or 5 regions. It's been configured a little differently. But this arrangement continues through the present year. In 2024, the YLACES-supported local SRS events reached hundreds of students across 4 events, and these numbers are expected to grow in 2025. It's not shown on this slide, but around 70% of the students were in grades K to 8, which we don't usually see at the regional, in part because they're really for middle and high school students. They also help to expand the reach to underserved and underrepresented school communities. This community level outreach by local grantee organizations is important for broadening participation in environmental science, and that goes for both types of SRS. The student and educator surveys we used for evaluation of the YLACES-supported local SRS events are modified versions of the surveys we use for the Globe Regional SRS because they're based on the same event model and have very similar objectives. They were originally developed by the Globe US office team in 2016, but there have been many iterations and updates since then. These are the core concepts measured in the student surveys now. They represent the main levers of influence the events have on students' experiences of science. Science interest is fairly straightforward. Science self-efficacy, or students' belief in their ability to succeed in science tasks, courses, or activities, has been found to influence the effort students put into pursuing science activities and their willingness to work through challenges they encounter in science activities, as well as their decisions regarding future education and careers in science.
Please.
Science identity, or the extent to which students feel that who they are as a person is compatible with being a scientist, has been linked to motivation and persistence in science education and careers. We also collect event feedback from students and educators. I'm going to pause there, see if there are any more questions. Oh, Jen put the regions in the chat, so thank you for that. Any other questions so far? Are we simmering on this? I can't really see hands up, so I assume someone will just stop me if there are any burning questions. Okay. So this year, we found that student agreement with statements about science self-efficacy increased significantly from before to after the 2024 local SRS events in aggregate. This chart shows the percentage of students agreeing or strongly agreeing with the statements. And we see these patterns at the regional and the local SRS pretty consistently. I'll give you a moment to take those in. There was also significant change on a couple of the science interest and identity items, but not all of them. Note, though, that where there was the least change on those last two, the agreement started higher before the events than a lot of the other ones. And that's just in part due to the students that are attracted to these types of events. The low career interest is consistent with our other SRS evaluations in that it's usually lower than these other ones, but especially so with younger students. And there were many of them that attended these events, but it still did increase significantly. Students also rated aspects of their engagement in the events on a scale of, and when I'm presenting this, I think I have to do it this way, yes and no, because we've got the capitals with the exclamation points, with items from the Science Learning Activation Lab Engagement Survey. I was also going to pop a link in the chat for that. I can't do it at the moment, but I'll do it after. Most students, just under 90%, felt happy and were focused on the activities at the events. Many felt excited, and fewer felt bored at some points during the event. Students more frequently selected the moderate responses, just the either yes or no, over those enthusiastic responses I already acted out for you. But interestingly, more than half of the students who reported feeling bored also reported feeling happy or focused on the activities at the events. And just under half of those also reported feeling excited. So they may have experienced a range of different reactions as they went through different activities at the events, because these were not mutually exclusive. You could be very happy, excited, and bored if you wanted to be. They also might have misunderstood the negatively worded item, because this one, like a higher score is worse for bored, especially with younger kids. So that's a possibility too. But in any case, the results suggest that the large majority of students were positively engaged in the activities at least some point in the event. Students' responses to open-ended survey questions illustrate several outcomes of these events. The survey questions provided space for students to complete the sentences, "Before I thought," and "Now I know," to describe the ways in which their perspectives changed following the events they attended. This item is from the original Globe SRS student survey. We also asked students what they enjoyed about the SRS. So some of those comments are coming up for you. Like this one here, students who thought the events would be boring reported enjoying them. And that we've seen for years. They don't know what to expect, maybe something like they've done before at a science fair or like science class, and they experience something totally different that they didn't anticipate. We also saw comments illustrating that students gained science confidence and self-efficacy during the events. Like this one saying, "I enjoyed talking to Before I thought I wasn't that good at explaining my research and doing science. Now I know I'm good at explaining my research." A few students became interested in science research and careers. Am I giving enough time to read comments? Yes? Okay. And I assume we can also share the slides after. Okay. And students also enjoyed the exchange of ideas with peers and STEM professionals. Educators also benefited from participation in these events. Many reported that it improved their ability to integrate science research into their classroom or program. Educators were also highly satisfied with the events as a science learning experience for students. As one educator commented, having scientists evaluate them is such a unique opportunity. Most educators would attend an SRS event again in the future, citing positive experiences in their comments, like the one on this slide, about the connections they made at the event. So over the years, we've found that both the regional and local SRS have demonstrated positive impact on student science interest, self-efficacy, and identity. We've also found that the regional and local SRS each offer unique benefits. The regional SRS are larger two-day events with students from multiple states that are more like the national research conferences they may attend in the future if they pursue STEM education and careers. These can be especially exciting for students who have not had opportunities to travel before, and Globe offers travel scholarships to many of the participating students and educators. Even with travel scholarships, though, travel can be out of reach or impractical for younger students and those with travel barriers like prohibitive family and work responsibilities. The local SRS are typically closer to home and more easily accessible for folks in that situation. And they focus more on the ecosystems, resources, and communities in the participants' local area. For some, it can also serve as an entry point to greater involvement in GLOBE or other environmental science activities. So now that you know all this about the local SRS, how can you bring one to your community? You may be asking yourself. And so I will turn it over to Dixon to tell you more about YLACES local SRS grants.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. So first of all, what is YLACES? We're a nonprofit committed to fostering scientific habits of mind. Our idea is not to create necessarily more scientists or engineers, but to create a population that knows how to think scientifically as they approach all the challenges of life. So we give assistance and make awards for the implementation of inquiry-based experiential science education, where students do science and contribute to the understanding of our environment. So let's go to the next one. So basically, we're a grant maker. Okay, so what we're focusing on today, we provide grants of up to $5,000 to sponsor or help a local student research symposium happen. There need to be the peer-to-peer reviews, students to students, and the opportunities to students to talk with STEM professionals about their research. Whatever else is thrown in or added into that to enrich the experience is very much up to the local event sponsors. Research grants we offer up to $1,500 for instruments and supplies to facilitate youth environmental research and data collection. And we also advocate for the inclusion of student research in all science education. To learn science, you need to do science, and that's far more effective than reading about the scientific method in a textbook. Okay? Oh my goodness, we're already back to you, Eleanor.
Yeah, well, this is just kind of our closing slide here. We've got plenty of time for Q&A. if anyone has anything they want to ask us about or bring into the discussion.
Hello, I have a question. My name is Matt Dale. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. I'm a YLACES recipient of the grant, and I have a question about the survey. And so,
Mhm.
when you were administering the survey to the students, is there any special type of format you had to follow, or did you have to get approval to give the survey out prior to giving the survey?
Yeah, so the way we did this is we provided the survey to the event leads who administered them. But we had a conversation first. You know, we want to make sure everybody has a chance to review them. And also, if anyone is planning to do their own evaluation or research activities at the event, we're happy to coordinate with them. We certainly don't want to make things overly burdensome. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity for learning and program improvement. But we did provide the surveys. We provided fairly detailed instructions on administration to try to keep it as uniform as possible across sites. Those were then mailed back to us, and we managed all the data entry management and analysis. We have talked to some of the grantees this year about accessing data. So we're really working closely with the grantees to do this in a cooperative way. Does that answer?
Okay,
Yeah,
that does awesome. I appreciate it.
sure.
So there was another question about, are there requirements? We asked for proposals, and the proposals come from the person and the institution they represent to conduct a student research symposium. They can vary widely, but the key is that it include those two critical elements: the students doing peer-to-peer presentations and interactions, and students getting to interact with STEM professionals, so that some of them we've had show up at student research symposia have never met a scientist or an engineer. And it's pretty eye-opening. I hate to think of myself as somebody that exotic, but I guess we are in some people's minds. Then there was another question all the way to the end of that said something about talking about the peer-to-peer. And that's really put the students in a room without the teachers, without adult monitors, and give them the chance to function in a fairly mature way and make their presentations to each other, ask each other questions, and learn from each other, and often be very supportive of one another. So what you're seeing is students who've been through the same experience getting to share that experience and to getting to ask you questions about the experience. I hope that helps answer the question.
Yes, thank you.
Good.
I did
Uh,
put if I could, I did put the link for the Student Research Symposia, the regional one, and that peer review form is in the chat, so that you could see what we kind of use. And these are always continually being updated, but that is the one that we used last year.
All right, and before we go any further, I think the Student Research Symposium idea is just fantastic, and it's very distinct from science fairs. Science fairs, in effect, are science talent searches operating on the belief that people who are going to grow up to be scientists are somehow different, and that let's identify them and then shower various kinds of special education on them. This idea for a student research symposium that reaches everyone and works to build the scientific thinking ability of everyone is an idea that was created by Jen Bourgeot. And for that, I'm always grateful.
Thank you for that, Dixon. I'm going to attempt to answer some of the other questions in here, but I would love for you and Jen and Lee to pipe in. The peer-to-peer review, I do want to point out, and many other aspects of this are handled differently at the Globe Regional SRS versus the YLACES local SRS events. There is a peer review process that's used for the Globe Regional, for the YLACES. Again, these are very locally driven because the process that works for one location, community, age group might not be the best process for another. So there's a lot more variation in how those are implemented. I'm going to get to tips in a second, but I saw another question. Who's responsible for recruiting the scientists? That is the local event leads who do that. Yeah, for the regional event host relay. Yeah, that's the same regional and local. The leads of the event locally are working with scientists, preferably in their communities or their regions. I actually stuck a couple of tips for successful events based on this year's local SRS evaluation, and we were kind of offering it as bonus content. But since there was a question about it, I'll show you some bonus content that will be in the slide deck. So what we've learned this year from various comments from educators and students, that it's good to provide a variety of activities. So you've got to have these core components, but what else is at your venue or in that area, or who could come as a guest speaker to, bring in some local resources, bring in some variety and make it exciting. Especially young people really like doing hands-on stuff. They like being able to walk around. They like being able to explore and stay active rather than staying seated and quiet for long periods of time. And then prep time, try to engage with the educators to make sure everyone has enough time to prepare their projects, because the projects are such an important piece of this experience. And it's hard. I know it's hard. There are just so many moving parts to these things, but the more advanced notice you can get to everyone, the better.
And also, at least on the local ones, we don't specify whether the STEM professionals are there virtually or in person. That's really left up to you as to what's practical in your location and what you can pull off.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the grant is very much intended to empower you as the local organizer to pull this thing off as best you can with the most benefits you can get. And maybe even it becomes a more routine part of what you do. We've certainly had repeat local SRSs that have stretched over 3 years. But we do like after 3 years for people to begin to look for their own local sources of support and free up more funding to go to others.
Yeah, and I'd throw in related to that, we see some that are supported wholly by these grants and others that use it as part of a mix of funding and support, including in-kind support from organizational staff in the time that they spend on it to make these events happen. So these were just some other, it's things that, like, when you're in a science space or you're in a grown-up space or not an event planning space, you might not really be thinking about a lot in your work. But things like comfortable seating, especially during the times people aren't presenting or active, they might want to rest a little bit, sit down. Lines of sight to posters, making sure there's enough room for several people to be looking at a poster at the same time. That people can move around in the space fairly easily, and food. I mean, we always, for every event, see a few comments about the food. So it might not seem like so much, but you get happier, lively people when they get food that they're happy with. Okay, and with that, I'm going to go back to the chat because I see a lot of things here. Can the STEM professional be virtual? I have
was trying
seen
to answer
some.
that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dixon. Go for
I
it.
was trying to answer that and say, if that's what you have to do, do it. We've had some limited success, but if you can make that connect, and that's what you need to do to draw them in, do it. In other words, the locals, we try and provide you, we just want to empower you to pull off the event the best you can.
I would say too that STEM professionals are in different roles. So like virtual keynotes might work better than virtual project review if you have to make choices like that. I think we've covered, did we miss any? Oh, let's see. Yeah. Did we miss anything in the chat? Or does anyone else have any other questions?
You know, Eleanor, there was a great question about keeping students occupied and attentive. And I think one of the really interesting things that I've seen is one, students are really, once they've done their own research project, they're really quite interested in seeing their peers' projects. And that one way of providing feedback was sort of a sticker system where students could meet with their peers, review the board, and then have a series of stickers that they could put on the back of the board to provide feedback to their peers. And that, I think, added a really nice level of engagement. And then we had a number of questions about the YLACES grants, and we put the link, thanks Jen, in there. The current grant cycle is open through the end of February, and Dixon has done a fabulous job understanding that educators are really busy. So the application process and the lift on the back end, especially with Eleanor's support on the SRSs, is really with educators, busy educators in mind.
In other words, we don't ask for a whole lot more than just the bare necessities.
I'll also say that some of our, keeping kids occupied is definitely a challenge for the regional ones and local ones, right? So even when we have opportunities, what our hosts have done in those regional events is done this one-to-one ratio where students are either presenting their project to their peer or listening to the projects from their peers, or they're rotating through another station where they're engaged in hands-on activities, so that you're really keeping the groups low enough so that everybody's occupied either presenting, listening, or doing some other activity that's a hands-on one out of the room, and then coming in and cycling through. So that's just another kind of thing that I've seen some of our regional groups do. And I don't know, there's a couple people here who have hosted. So Nate Rayner is here. He's hosted one of our regional ones. And Odell is here and he's also hosted, and Nico. So I don't know if any of them would also like to comment on that aspect of keeping kids engaged.
What we've done in the past when we hosted, after the reviewers did their thing, we had lunch, and then we gave them an opportunity to go to. But this year, we're going to give them two options. One, we have a space Hall of Fame museum and White Sands National Monument, where they can go and visit that as well, and then have our banquet at night so they can get kind of dressed up. And they seemed to like that when we did it last time. The school let us use the bus, and we took a bus and I think a couple of vans as well to White Sands National Monument, and they got to play in the sand for a couple of hours, and that kind of loosened them up for the events that night. So we plan on offering two options right after lunch, and have all of the reviews done and get them out of the building and seeing some of the area that we have here in New Mexico.
Thanks, Nate.
I can say from the evaluations that the students really enjoy those field trips and tours. That's one of the top rated things that they've ranked in terms of what they enjoy at the regional SRS.
Eleanor, can you just talk a little bit about the finding about how being in a different space has come up for students? Can you just say, 2 sentences about that? Because I think that's important to just acknowledge too.
Yeah, so something that we found in the Globe Regional SRS evaluations is this aspect of novelty kind of waking students up to learning and experiencing science. And that can come from a small thing like being in a different part even of their own school campus, if that's what's available. So like getting them out of the classroom, getting them into another space, another place, bringing in new people, guest speakers they have not heard from before, new activities they've never tried before. This novelty seems to always rise to the top as something that just wakes them up and really engages them, even in small ways. And
We're
Jen,
quite
I
fle-
think, oh, sorry
we're
about that,
quite
Dixon.
flexible on what constitutes local. It could be from within a school, it could be within a community, within a school system, or it could be where, basically there's no need for overnight housing. And that they pile some learners into a van and get them there with a couple hour drive. That's okay too. So that's just all what meets your need.
And Jen and Haley at the US office, they've put together something called the SRS Do Guide that's based on our evaluation results. That just kind of like these tips for successful activities. And Jen, do you have a link to that handy by any chance? I'm trying to find it myself right now. Oh, I think I found it. Yeah. Here's the SRS Do Guide in the chat. And this is a lot of the same things again that we saw with the local SRS evaluations: reduce the time spent sitting and listening in favor of more active hands-on learning experiences, showcasing science-related jobs. This is another one that we found from the years of the regional SRS evaluation, is that it really made a difference for someone to come and talk about their career path in science. It got students more interested in science careers. Diverse representation of teachers, scientists, and reviewers so that all students can see themselves as future science professionals. And the way that happens is by continuing to build and strengthen regional and local partnerships. And there's more communication with the participants so they know what's happening, what the day is going to look like, transportation, venues, that sort of thing. So that's all there in the SRS Do Guide. A good resource if you're planning to propose an event.
So there was a question of, can we give an example of an event to engage the students that's straightforward and quiet and can get done?
And quiet. Inexpensive, engaging, and quiet. That is a great question. I'm trying to think of an example here.
We have some examples from the regional events where
Yeah.
Globe Partners have done different things. I think one of the big things that we've done that also got students to talk to one another who didn't know each other was kind of a geocaching idea around a location. And when they get somewhere, instead of just they do a protocol, a globe protocol. So they might do something like in the spring, they might measure the length of a leaf, or they might do a canopy cover measurement, or they might do a cloud measurement. So kind of incorporating, at least in our events, because they're globe events, incorporating some of doing of globe activities when they reach a space that's a geocache. So kind of combining those. I'm not sure exactly if that's quiet.
I know at one of, I want to say it might have been one of Nate's, they were building wind towers. Was that you, Nate?
Yeah, that year we did wind towers. Yeah, that was fun. That was my second one, I think. Yeah, that was we had like 4 stations, I think. Wind tower was one of them, and something else. I forget what it was. It's been a while.
Yeah, that was a while back. But I
But I
remember
don't
seeing the
remember the wind
photos.
towers. Because they ran out of time and they couldn't complete them. Some of the kids didn't like that. They wanted to complete them.
Oh, oh no. I've seen a lot of drone projects. I know the kids really like anything to do with drones. Some of them have gotten to go out into the ecosystems in their own communities, and that has been really eye-opening for them. Like I remember Jody's when they went out into a prairie ecosystem in Ohio. I mean, this doesn't have to be the Grand Canyon. It's what is in your backyard. And the kids had no idea of the value of the ecological value of prairies or about endangered prairie species. And they were so excited to find out that this was right there, where they could come back and study it even after the event. So I think it is a matter of like, you don't have to think huge here. What are the resources in your local community that students might not even know about?
There was also a question about the time frame.
Mm.
YLACES is willing to accept local proposals for an SRS that might not happen until 2026, sometime in the spring, not the summer. But sometimes it takes you quite a while to prepare, and we understand that. The idea is to empower you to get started and take off.
Did that answer your question, Susan? Was it the time frame of when you could host, or was it how long is one and how long do you need to prepare? Because I think that's very dependent on what you want as well. I can tell you that we are preparing now for the regional ones. So it does take a couple months for us to prepare.
Yes, hi, thank you. Forgive me for being tardy, but yes, that's very generous. I was thinking by the end of 2025, but to be able to also plan it for next year would be wonderful as well, because it could be even more thoroughly planned. We have this idea of studying bioluminaires in Alabama, and there's a place about 2 hours away where we can go into a cave and look at these luminary worms, as well as fireflies. So we want to do that in the summer, in the warmer months. So I was just wondering how long we have, if we were to receive this grant, how long we have to put the SRS together. Thank
And
you.
so now you know.
Yes, thank you.
That sounds like something students would really enjoy.
I know, right? Well,
I mean, I would enjoy that. That sounds great. That sounds super cool.
It was Matt's idea. It's brilliant Matt Dale's idea. Yeah.
And I personally have always loved the word bioluminescence.
Me too. I love that word. When I I just say it over and over. It's really cool.
And the timing sometimes is around the projects too. So if it depends, like that can be an activity or a field trip during an SRS where they're already presenting research, or it can be an activity that kicks off data collection for a project that's presented later at an SRS. So people time these in different ways around the activities they're planning with their students or participants. I have done that, Imani. It was beautiful. Seen the bioluminescent bays in Puerto Rico. I had the wonderful opportunity to kayak in one of those bays, and it was really amazing at night, of course, at night.
Now we just have to have Puerto Rico have a SRS.
Yeah.
And we can all be invited.
They
Okay,
are in
it
the
is,
Southeast region.
they are. So we have 1 minute left. If you have any last questions, please put them in the chat. We can always circle back and answer them through email. And Dixon's email is on here, Eleanor's is, and I would just like to thank our presenters, Eleanor, Lee, and Dixon, as always, and Dixon and Lee, especially YLACES, for your continued support of Globe community members and as supporting students as citizen environmental scientists.
And I certainly want to thank those of you out doing Globe for all your good work. It's always gratifying. So keep it up.